A very special welcome for our brother, Tim Warren.
Step that they put out for me, so I'm going to keep it, because I'm 5'8" on a good day, in these shoes. Never been this tall in my life. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to particularly say how nice it is to be back in the presence of so many old friends, and by that, I am not making reference to your age. I am merely commenting upon the longevity of our relationship. Not that there would be anything wrong with you being actually old friends. We all get old. Some people in this room remember me when I was about 19. Needless to say, they are looking at a very different individual today. I hope one who is stronger in his commitment and clearer in his commitment to undoing systems of oppression, particularly but not limited to institutional white supremacy, than I was at the age of 19. But I suppose we will see. One thing in particular that I want to point out and pay tribute to and thanks for is the presence within this room of my dear friends, colleagues, and comrades from the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Because without them, and without their presence in my life, dating back almost 20 years, I would be merely another white guy with a lot of ideas about racism, but very little analysis about racism, and very little understanding of what my role and what our role, those of us who are white, in this struggle should be. So I'm grateful for their leadership. I'm grateful for them as mentors, as they have continued to be for, as I said, almost 2 decades. And it is fitting that they are here because we are here to talk about what to some might seem like an internal squabble among the left. Right. To some they might say, and in fact I'm sure would say, why is it that the left, or the progressives, or whatever term we might use for ourselves, can't get their stuff together? They fight amongst themselves, and they look at us and they cluck their tongues and they say, why do you waste your time fighting each other? Don't you understand that we have bigger fish to fry, so to speak, that we have those on the right who obviously mean us no good organizing? Why are we fighting each other when we need to be fighting them? I used to be one of those people who said that. Because I believed that we did not have the luxury of dealing with our internal stuff. Now, how odd is that? Because if you can't get your internal stuff straight, if you cannot create a unified, solidaristic movement within your own community, how in the world can you possibly hope to do that in a larger society? But I didn't see that, so I take you back to 1993. And it was that year that the folks at the People's Institute, and then specifically European Descent, a collection of white anti-racist allies closely affiliated and connected to and with the Institute, brought to New Orleans, where I was living at the time and where the Institute has been historically headquartered for. An unbelievable organizer, educator, activist, anti-racist ally, Sharon Martinez, to come and speak about institutional racism and white supremacy and white privilege in left and liberal movements. And I remember going to this event with a friend of mine, another white, so-called radical activist. And although we enjoyed certain aspects of the presentations and got something out of it, we also had a highly cynical element to the way that we went into the room. We had this attitude, and I was as guilty as anyone of it, of saying, do we really have time for this? This was 1993. The right had been organizing against racial justice and equity forever. And so I was one of those who came in and thought to themselves, why do we have time? We don't have time to fight. We've got to put aside squabbles, and what is all this white privilege stuff anyway? I remember actually saying that to the man that I was with, also white, and him ratifying my denial. See, that's what we do. We talk to one another and ratify our preconceived notions of what is true and what isn't. And we walked out about halfway through, walked to the car, mumbling something about white privilege. What is that? And then we proceeded, note now the irony of what I'm about to tell you, proceeded to get in his car, drive from Loyola University, where the event was taking place uptown, just a few minutes away into Audubon Park, into the deepest, darkest part of Audubon Park where no one would see us, and we proceeded to get high while we complained about the non-entity, apparently, of white privilege. What is this white privilege? See, and church is a good place to come and confess one's sins. But the sin wasn't smoking weed. That was a minor infraction. The real sin, the real mistake, was not recognizing that we were denying the very thing that we were practicing. And in so doing, weakening our connection to real movement-building activity. That is to say, that we were undermining internally the work that needed to be done and didn't have to have folks on the right, did not require Newt Gingrich, for example, or Rush Limbaugh to do that work. So when folks ask you, as they're going to do in the course of this struggle for WBAI and Pacifica more broadly, why you're criticizing those who are your allies, number one, keep in mind, not everybody who says they are your ally is indeed that. More importantly, there are several good reasons why we have to deal with these things internally on what is broadly considered the left. Number one, because so oftentimes, if we know our history, particularly the history of the struggle against racism and white supremacy, we know that those who claim to be allies have often been the worst enemies and have indeed destroyed those movements from within, weakened them, whether we're talking about the labor movement, whether we're talking about anti-war movement, whether we're talking even about the civil rights struggle itself, which I think an accurate historical reading would suggest to you that even that work remains so unfinished in large part because of the internalized supremacy of some of the white folks in that movement who had very good intentions, but had not done the processing and the internal work that we, who call ourselves radicals and leftists and progressives, and even those who call themselves liberals, need to do. Secondly, we have to deal with these struggles because this is the part of daily reality over which we have some control. In other words, it's a practical matter. You do not run a corporation. You do not run the United States of America, however much you may think your vote does or doesn't count. But if you are involved in left media and left organizational structures and community building, that's where your base is. That's where your work has to be, because it's the area over which you have the most control. So you, practically speaking, need to start there. And perhaps most importantly, if we cannot get our, I'll say stuff, because we're in a church, together, how are we going to transform those larger institutional structures that operate within a system of white supremacy, within a system of patriarchal oppression, within a system of white supremacy, within a system of straight supremacy? How are we going to take on those larger power structures if we cannot deal with the abuse of power on our own side?